he was, I think, one of the greatest directors of our time.
As far as he was concerned, the audience was the thing. He's making a film for audiences.
He made them see and feel and understand what he wanted them to see and feel and understand.
Alfred Hitchcock was perhaps the most famous director who ever lived. His name will always be associated with such timeless films as Vertigo, Psycho, and North by Northwest. But before he arrived in Hollywood, Hitchcock had already left a legacy of groundbreaking British films.
He was born in Leytonstone on the eastern side of London to rather, not exactly lower middle class, but sort of fairly straitened circumstances. His father was a wholesale poulterer and greengrocer.
Hitchcock always liked to tell people about an event which he may have made up, he may have embroidered, but it's the official start, really, of the Hitchcock biography, autobiography. His father sent him with a note one day to the police station. He was only 5 or 6 at the time, and he handed over the note, and he was then put in jail, put behind bars, only for 5 minutes, and then they let him out and said, "That's what we do to naughty boys." And he said that affected him for life.
After leaving school, the young Hitchcock got his first job at the W.T. Henley Telegraphic Company. It was an unlikely apprenticeship for the master of suspense, but his artistic talent was already beginning to show.
A chap who lived next to me, who worked at Henley's, he said, "Hitchcock, I remember him, the boy we sacked for drawing stage sets on the blotter all the time." But then he found that famous players Lasky were operating in England, and he had a natural gift, his penmanship, to doing credit cards. And that's how he first got in.
Alfred Hitchcock had entered the British film industry when it was still in its infancy. When the American film company, famous players Lasky, closed down their operation in England, their production base in Islington, North London, became the site of Gainsborough Studios. It was here that Hitchcock would learn about all aspects of the filmmaking process.
When he went to work for Michael Balkan, the most dynamic of the young producers of that period, he was the right man in the right place at the right time.
At the age of 27, Hitchcock directed his first feature film, The Pleasure Garden. A morality tale set in the world of the theatre, it already showed some of the themes that would feature in much of Hitch's later work.
Hitchcock's first film opens with a scene of pure voyeurism, of the woman going onto the stage and a series of men in the audience looking at these close-up view of the women, and the man even gets out some opera glasses and looks at the woman's legs. It's really interesting that that begins Hitchcock's career, because it sets up a scene of male-female tension and the oppression of the woman by the man, which goes right through Hitchcock's work.
It is believed that all prints of Hitchcock's second film, The Mountain Eagle, have been lost forever. Hitchcock himself would later dismiss The Mountain Eagle as a very bad movie, and personally favoured his third film as director, The Lodger.
Hitchcock always said that The Lodger was the first real Hitchcock movie. Certainly The Lodger has that sense of crime and sex mixed up together.
Set in a dark and foggy London, The Lodger begins with the discovery of a body, the latest victim of a serial killer known as the Avenger. The murder coincides with the arrival of a mysterious stranger, played by Ivor Novello. A remote and secretive figure, the Lodger soon becomes a suspect in the hunt for the killer.
When Hitchcock made the film, Ivor Novello, of course, was one of the most popular actors and playwrights, parallel with Coward, and he was what we used to call the matinee idol. And it was tactfully pointed out to Hitchcock that he cannot be the villain. He's got to be proved innocent. Hitchcock's got the two themes there immediately, the man on the run, the mistaken killer, and he melded them together beautifully.
Yes, there's a lot of play of shadow, and there's also scenes like the use of the transparent ceiling. This was noticed by the critics, and it kind of showed that Hitchcock was a thoughtful, imaginative director.
A huge success, The Lodger was the first film to bring Hitchcock's name to a wider audience. It was also the first film to see the director make a brief cameo appearance.
He didn't immediately use that as a trademark thing. Apparently somebody was late and he thought he'd play the part himself. It was a small part. He just has his back to camera. He's the editor of a newspaper.
It's a very clever piece of publicity. I loved his remark when he said he always made his cameo appearance in the first 10 minutes because he didn't want the viewers to spend the rest of the film looking for him.
At that time, directors were looked upon as being very, very highly paid technicians. And it was Hitchcock who altered all that, at least in this country. Then, of course, when he went to America, then it blew up even bigger and bigger. And so then he became, his name on the picture was as big as the star, practically.
Hitchcock was reunited with Ivor Novello for his next film, Downhill. But before filming began, he married Alma Reville. An editor and continuity girl, she shared Hitchcock's passion for cinema, having entered the British film industry at the age of 16. When they returned from their honeymoon, they moved into a modest flat in Cromwell Road, West London. After the success of The Lodger, Hitchcock became dissatisfied with the work he was being offered and left Gainsborough for a contract with a new company, British International Pictures. For his 1929 film Blackmail, Hitchcock reshot several sequences to incorporate what some saw as a passing fad, synchronized sound. Britain's first feature-length talking picture, it was another triumph for Hitchcock, but one that proved to be short-lived.
He had taken a contract with a firm which seemed to be more ambitious than Gainsborough, but it turned out that their plans were not as lavish and successful as they'd been, as he'd expected them to be.
For Hitchcock, the most important thing was always control, as those fortunate enough to interview him found out.
Hitchcock was a superb person to interview. He had everything at his fingertips, but when the program was over, the producer said to me, "I told you not to let him beat you." I said, "Oh, he didn't beat me, didn't beat me." No, he said, "Hitchcock forced you into his voice rhythm." And I think it was part of his element of control. He was saying that you are interviewing me at my speed.
Frustrated by the projects he was offered, Hitchcock had even contemplated giving up directing to become a producer. But another success was just around the corner, when he returned to Gainsborough Studios for The Man Who Knew Too Much.
This is, after all, 1934. Hitler has become Chancellor in Germany in 1933, and suddenly it becomes very topical.
Tell me, in June 1914, had you ever heard of a place called Sarajevo? Of course you hadn't. I doubt if you'd even heard of the Archduke Ferdinand. But in a month's time, because a man you've never heard of killed another man you've never heard of, in a place you've never heard of, this country was at war.
One reason the films retain their power is that we know how prophetic they were.
I hope you weren't very rough with him. You see, he's subject to apoplexy. Who?
For the role of a sinister foreign spy, Hitchcock brought over an actor who had made a memorable impact on German cinema.
I ought to have mentioned it to you, perhaps. You should learn to control your fatherly feelings.
Peter Lorre had come over from Germany, where he'd been making a film called M, about the child murders of Dusseldorf, where he was a psychopathic child murderer. And Peter certainly wasn't like, he had a lovely little Rubicon face with a giggle, and I liked him very much. But he had a peculiar way of dropping his eyelid and looking immensely sinister.
Collected our brother's little offering yet? Have you?
Oh, sir, I forgot.
Pardon me. Dangerous.
Hitchcock always planned every aspect of his films in the most meticulous detail.
When he came on the stage the first day of shooting, he put the script down on the sound desk and said, "Right, another one in the bag." And the implication is not that he had any disrespect for the making of the film, but as far as he was concerned, he knew the film so well, it was already in his mind. The Albert Hall sequence, of course, was the major example of it.
The tension, of course, again, Hitchcock's beautiful sense of editing. I think that made it a superb piece of film.
Sounds like it went off all right.
I hope so, for all our sakes.
Hitchcock would insist on discipline from the cast and crew, but the director himself had already acquired some very strange habits. When working on the set, Hitchcock often enjoyed the odd cup of tea. When he'd finished, Hitchcock would often throw the cup over his shoulder, letting it smash wherever it landed.
You probably like to know about Hitchcock and his fun and games. Every day at 10 o'clock, he got the barber. The barber did the whole of the business right in the center of the set, because Hitchcock always wanted everything to go on around him.
The black humour of Hitchcock's films was also reflected off-camera, as the cast and crew fell victim to a series of practical jokes.
He got me along to his famous flat in Cromwell Road. He put on some outrageous music, and with his Buddha-like face, he pretended to be a woman stripped down to her waist with enormous bosoms, which he was tossing over his shoulder. Peter Lorre killing himself laughing, Hitch not moving a muscle. Then he took me on one side and he said, all these people are drinking hard liquor and so on. I've got some orange juice set aside for you. So I said, thanks very much, Hitch, that's very kind of you. So he gave me a great note. So I lashed into this, not realizing he'd laced it. And he then took me along to the Savoy. And he began to creep up on me. How I finished the meal, how I got home, I shall never know.
Teddy Joseph worked as a third assistant director on Hitchcock's 1936 film Sabotage. He too fell for a Hitchcock prank, one which mirrored the film's most famous sequence.
He gave me a parcel, a very large parcel, and he said, Teddy, will you take it up to the cutting rooms? Be absolutely sure that it won't be broken, but it could blow up. So, being 16 and a half and very new, I said, okay, Gov, and I went off. And the liftman said, I'm afraid I can't, that's explosive. I'm afraid you'll have to walk. I went up there, and as soon as I got up to the top, the editor said, no, you better go back, because Hitchcock would be very angry with this parcel. Anyway, I took it back to Hitch and said, I'm sorry, I've been all the way up the stairs, and now they say it's got to be brought back to you. So Hitch got hold of a hammer from the carpenter and said, well, don't worry, bash like that, and the thing blew up. Yeah, and that was one of his jokes.
He had a suspense sequence which ends not with a release of suspense when the bomb doesn't go off, but he actually exploded a very sympathetic character who was playing with a dog on a bus, and all sorts of innocent people got blown up.
Hello, nervy. Upset with those shots tonight?
I fired those shots.
Before Hitchcock shocked audiences with Sabotage, he adapted John Buchan's popular novel, The 39 Steps.
There were two men there who wanted to kill me.
Really, you should be more careful in choosing your gentleman friends.
No.
The lead role went to Robert Donat. His performance as the suave Richard Hannay proved to be the definitive Hitchcock hero.
The 39 Steps was used pretty explicitly as a template for North by Northwest by Ernest Lehman, who wanted to make the most Hitchcock film that he could possibly make, and he perceived the 39 Steps and Robert Donat as being absolutely quintessential to his sense of Hitchcock.
What's the idea? What you doing?
As long as you stay, he stays.
Yes, and as long as I go, you go. Come on.
Stop them! They've got away!
The whole idea of a man on the run being handcuffed, shackled to the girl, I mean, I understand that was one of Hitchcock's jokes. He used to put handcuffs, I believe he did it to Donat, and then pretend he'd lost the key.
Is your name Hannay?
No.
Are you coming in to tea, sir?
I'll be right along.
And also the idea of a chase, going up to Scotland, which he thought was a fairly remote area, and having one of his early polished villains in Godfrey Turl.
But why come all this way to Scotland to tell me about it?
I believe she was coming to see you about some Air Ministry secret. She was killed by a foreign agent who was interested too.
Did she tell you what the foreign agent looked like?
There wasn't time. No, there was one thing. Part of his little finger was missing.
Which one?
This one, I think.
Sure it wasn't this one?
He had all the things that I think he later made such a success in his career, and he was able to put them all together in one boiling pot.
What are the 39 steps? Come on, answer up! What are the 39 steps?
The 39 Steps is an organization of spies, collecting information on behalf of the Foreign Office of...
The 39 Steps also features a classic example of something which Hitchcock would always refer to as the MacGuffin.
The story that Hitchcock always told was of two men travelling up to Scotland. And one man said to the other, "That's a very peculiarly shaped parcel in the rack above you." He said, "Well, that's a MacGuffin." He said, "Well, what is a MacGuffin?" He said, "Oh, that's when you're shooting lions and tigers in Scotland." "But there aren't any lions and tigers in Scotland." "Oh, well, there's no MacGuffin then."
The MacGuffin seems simply to refer to an object or device which is the motor of the plot, but is not important in itself.
The first feature of the new engine is its greatly increased ratio of compression, represented by R minus 1 over R to the power of gamma.
Now, in the 39 Steps, there's a secret, the specification of a new aeroplane. We never wonder what it is just something which the characters are seeking.
The 39 Steps brought Hitchcock's unique style to the attention of several producers in Hollywood. For his next film, The Secret Agent, he shrewdly gave a major role to Hollywood star Robert Young.
I'd better keep this handy. You see, I don't trust you.
In the 1937 film, Young and Innocent, Hitchcock left behind the world of espionage. This time, Derek DeMarney is the innocent man falsely accused of murder. The identity of the real killer is revealed in one of Hitchcock's most ambitious technical triumphs.
The crane shot was unique. First of all, it was in a ballroom, and the crane arm with a camera had to start right from the base of the ballroom and go about 100 feet, right the way through the dancers and going right across to a drummer. The crane went on and on and on, right up to the eyes of the drummer, and then the drummer started to squint, just to flash, flash, flash. Wonderful shot. We took the whole day to do it.
Hello, feeling queer? What's that pipe of yours, George? Why don't you throw your old socks away?
With a witty script by the celebrated partnership of Lauder and Gilliatt, The Lady Vanishes proved to be one of Hitchcock's most polished comedy thrillers.
Bad luck. Can I help?
No, only by going away.
No. My father always taught me never desert a lady in trouble. He even carried that as far as marrying Mother.
I think what makes Lady Vanishes so successful at the time as well as since is partly its very precise engineering of the plot and its sort of irresistible momentum of mystery and romance, but also the take that it has on Englishness.
Well, we're very grateful. It's lucky some of you fellows understand English.
Well, I was at Oxford.
Oh, really? So was I.
Like several of Hitchcock's English thrillers, The Lady Vanishes acknowledged the possibility of conflict in Europe.
That's fixed him.
That's all right, he's only stunned.
What the blazes did you do that for?
Well, I was at Cambridge.
Well, what's that got to do with it? You heard what he said, didn't you?
I heard what she said. That was a trick to get us off the train.
I don't believe it. The man's explanation was quite satisfactory.
Thing like this might cause a war.
It was a perfect prediction of what the future would hold.
Well, then you saw her.
I repeat, we were deep in conversation. We were discussing cricket.
Well, I don't see how a thing like cricket can make you forget seeing people.
Oh, don't you? Oh, if that's your attitude, obviously there's nothing more to be said. Come, Caldicott.
There you had the attitudes of Charters and Caldicott. The two men are so mad about cricket that they don't bother with it. But yet, in the end, they turn up trumps and they're the ones who defeat the villains.
What's going on here?
He's got a gun and he won't use it.
What's the idea?
Well, I've told you. I won't be a party to this sort of thing. I don't believe in fighting.
Oh, pacifist, eh? Won't work, old boy. Early Christians tried it and got thrown to the lions. Come on, hang it up.
But there's also the figure of the judge, played by Cecil Parker, who has his own selfish reasons for denying the existence of the woman. And he becomes a very sinister figure. He becomes identified with appeasement.
Very well. You go your way. I'll go mine. Hey, where are you off to? I know what I'm about. I'm doing the only sensible thing. Oh, let the fella go if he wants to.
It was while filming The Lady Vanishes that Hitchcock was offered a 4-picture deal with one of Hollywood's most powerful producers, David O. Selznick. It proved to be an offer that Hitch couldn't refuse.
I think it was it not Orson Welles who said a film studio is the biggest train set any small boy can have. And when he went to America and he found that these studios had these fantastic, almost unlimited sets, costumes, staff, budgets, he knew then that he could expand, and he did.
The Lady Vanishes would have made a suitable swan song to his career in England, but before he left for America, Hitchcock agreed to direct an adaptation of the Daphne du Maurier novel, Jamaica Inn. By now, Hitchcock had become a household name.
When you have developed this prestige and reputation, the actors and the stars, they want to be in a Hitchcock picture, in the same way as they wanted to be in a David Lean picture. They knew it was going to be absolute hell, but nevertheless, they knew that it was going to be good.
Hitchcock had little time for self-indulgent actors. When filming began on Jamaica Inn, he soon ran into difficulties with his leading man.
When Charlie Fox and Sheridan would be there with him in the pavilion at Brighton. In those days, he was still a gentleman. Now he's nothing but a painted bag of maraschino and plum pudding.
He couldn't control it. Lawton was in control, Charles Lawton. He wasn't used to having actors control him. He'd been hired by Lawton's own production company, and it was a vehicle for Charles Lawton. And Charles Lawton's performance is very over the top.
You see, sir, butcher, baker. Butcher and baker there, you old numbskull!
For a director who was once quoted as saying that actors should be treated as if they were cattle, the completion of Jamaica Inn could not come soon enough. His contractual obligations fulfilled, Hitchcock left for America in 1939. He would work there for the next 3 decades, yet always remained an Englishman abroad.
Hitchcock is an English director, and almost all of the technical and thematic elements which make his Hollywood films so important are there, quite successfully developed in the English films.
He always got the best out of his actors. He had the ability to use all the technical devices at his disposal. He also had, I think, a great sense of humour.
Put a pretty girl inside those, and she needn't be ashamed of herself anywhere.
All right, bring it back to me when it's filled.
I will.
Those are the things which made him, I think, quite rightly, in my opinion, one of the greatest film directors in the world.
Hitchcock had brought to the screen a mixture of suspense, sexuality, and pitch-black humour that has often been imitated, but never equalled. The first chapter of his career had come to an end, but this was only the beginning.